Welcome to the Pregnancy Help Podcast. I'm Christine Grimmett. I'm here with Nafisa Kennedy, the director of Option Line, which is a 24/7 pregnancy helpline. Nafisa's team of consultants stand ready to answer those calls and chats day and night from women seeking answers to their pregnancy questions and to provide support and compassion to those in need. Visit optionline.org for more information, and I'll also drop an email address in the notes if you're a pregnancy help organization interested in having Option Line answer your after-hours phone calls. Nafisa and I are excited to be bringing in a special guest on this episode. Shelley Hauter is a parent care coordinator through the website prenataldiagnosis.org, and she provides perinatal grief support at Living Alternatives Pregnancy Resource Center, where she works with families facing a prenatal diagnosis, supporting them, advocating for them. So we'll talk more about what that looks like. But first of all, I want to welcome Shelley to the podcast.
It's great to be here, Christine. I love listening to your podcast as I'm able, and I've definitely went back through and made sure I've listened to other podcasts that you've done on this topic. So I'm just really encouraged by the growth in this area of pregnancy care centers, and happy to be here today.
Awesome. Thanks. Great. Love to hear that. So Nafisa, let's start with you and we'll go from there. So if you can give us your background with Option Line and then explain how prenataldiagnosis.org came to be. What's the story behind that?
Absolutely. Thanks, Christine. I have been with Option Line for 18 years now. Really fell in love with the work from my interview for my consultant position back in 2006. And at every turn, the Lord has called me to stay here in this role for supporting women in need of pregnancy help. So I've been around quite a while at Option Line, and in 2021, Option Line was invited to step into some working group meetings with a few other organizations in the pregnancy help movement. Her Plan, Charlotte Lozier Institute, and Be Not Afraid were collaborating on a new project to serve families facing a prenatal diagnosis. And those early meetings were so exciting and enlightening for me as someone who's had really limited experience serving families facing a prenatal diagnosis. At Option Line, our calls are a little more brief. We're seed planters, and so we don't get to see the whole story. But I had some experience talking with moms who were considering abortion due to a prenatal diagnosis. So I was really excited to just be part of those early meetings with the working group. And over the course of a few years, we have worked to establish an initiative to serve these families who are often very limited in their resources. So that starts with our website, prenataldiagnosis.org, which contains lots of really helpful content for families facing a diagnosis. It also includes parent stories and other resources that might be helpful to a family facing a diagnosis. But one of the key aspects of this initiative is the connection to a parent care coordinator. Option Line is listed on prenataldiagnosis.org. Folks can call us, chat, text, or email and reach one of our consultants at the Option Line. And then from there, we get them connected with a parent care coordinator serving their community. Parent care coordinators provide a free service of practical guidance, information, and referrals so that parents understand what's normal, possible, and what might be helpful as they carry to term. And that support is provided for an entire year following the birth. So prenataldiagnosis.org was launched just back in 2023, and we've been so privileged to work with the other members of the working group and now several parent care coordinators. So Shelley, I'm really excited to understand more about how your experience has been serving these families. Would you maybe take us through your background and what led you to this ministry?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I have been involved at pregnancy care centers, a couple of them since 2013, actually. 2013, always wanted to be able to volunteer. My background is I'm a nurse, but I stayed home with my kids for many years and then when the last one got into kindergarten, it was just a goal of mine to be able to volunteer at a pregnancy resource center, which is what I started to do. And happy to volunteer as a nurse and see clients in that way. And then not long in that journey, I was asked to become director of our local center. So I was director for almost 5 years, I think. And as I just needed, my center was growing and it needed a little bit more time and resources. I was part-time at that time and still am, but my center needed more hours from someone who could give a little bit more. So I stepped down as director, but my heart wanted to still really be involved. And I knew I could as a volunteer in some capacity, but at that same time, my organization had an opening and we were really working to expand. And it was happening at the same time that things were changing for Heartbeat and your launching of the website and wanting to have parent care coordinators that you could refer clients to, women to. So it was all happening hand in hand with that. So I stepped over from director of my center to be trained as a parent care coordinator. So that's, I did my training in 2023. And had started the position about 6 months before that. So the end of 2022, as things were changing also for Heartbeat. And so went through training through Be Not Afraid to become a parent care coordinator. And so that's what I've been able to do the last year and a half.
That's amazing, Shelley. I'm really struck by the fact that you were able to serve as director in a part-time capacity. That just, I think, speaks to your abilities. And I'm so grateful for all that you have been able to accomplish in your role in the pregnancy help community. So that shift to parent care coordinator must have been a very interesting one for you. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your ministry as a parent care coordinator? Maybe tell us a little bit more about Willow's story.
Yeah, my center is Living Alternatives Pregnancy Resource Center, and we have about 12 centers, some satellite centers throughout Illinois and a couple in Indiana. And I had a director and an assistant director at my center when I was director. And we actually flip-flop roles in the most beautiful way because I became a parent care coordinator. And then my former assistant director became the director of our program. So we flip-flop roles, and I knew it would be perfect because Paula is excellent at what she does at directing our Willow Story program. And she also went through the training. She's a parent care coordinator herself. So we both are working with this with our ministry. And what we were finding at Living Alternatives, we've 39 going on 40 years of ministry and through our centers. And we've had for many, many years program to help women who've had a loss or have been given a diagnosis. So that probably formally started in 2008 as we saw the need to have something more structured that we could work with women. But what I kind of have found, we had the program and it was there and available and it was on our website. So maybe women would hear about it, but what we were really reaching was women who were within our center already. Maybe they've been a client, a medical client and a medical patient, and having had an ultrasound, maybe that loss would be identified in an ultrasound. You're walking with these women who've had an early pregnancy loss, a miscarriage, or it appears that she may be miscarrying, or she's a client of our, we call it our HOPE program, but, with their parenting, pregnancy and parenting classes that they go through, like all, pregnancy centers have those. So maybe she's already a client in that way and has a mentor she's working with. and then has a loss or is given a diagnosis during that. So we had programming already to be up and able to meet her needs. But I think the interesting thing about this, and what I really appreciate about Heartbeat International doing, is creating this website, because I'm not sure if you were pregnant and not connected to a pregnancy center already, if you would find a pregnancy resource center, if you would even think that that would be a resource that they would offer. I think there was maybe a gap there. And so I feel like parents may fall on this website, the prenataldiagnosis.org website, more easily and be able to be resourced through that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons that prenataldiagnosis.org was established, because a lot of these families are different from your average pregnancy help center client, in that many of these were planned pregnancies, and they are often quite far along when they receive a diagnosis or a recommendation to abort due to a assumed a diagnosis. So it is kind of a different client and so a different audience. But I think, Shelley, you actually highlighted a really great point in that our pregnancy help organizations, often encounter situations where they might need to utilize resources like prenataldiagnosis.org, or to be able to connect families with a parent care coordinator in some way. And so kudos to you and your organization for seeing that need and being ready to meet it. And thank God that he gave you the wisdom and resources to make that happen. Would you be able to provide us with a couple of examples of stories of families that you've been able to serve personally as a parent care coordinator? I think that would be so interesting.
Yeah. I think when a story that will always stick out to me, as I first took on the role of parent care coordinator, and I was just at the kind of beginning of my training, but we have resources internally, and there are lots of great resources out there, but so I just equipped myself the best that I could, and it was sort of happening simultaneously as I was taking the Be Not Afraid parent care coordinator training. But we had a client within our pregnancy center who was pregnant with twins. And she had started with us from the very first ultrasound and pregnancy test, and coming to our pregnancy and parenting classes, and just working her way through it as a typical client, and but pregnant with twins. And she had her last appointment on Thursday, and then went home to go into preterm labor and delivered her twins, who subsequently died very soon after. And she was about 21 weeks pregnant. And just being able to really meet her in that moment. I mean, it was, as happens at our pregnancy centers, you might have a no-show or a call, or the client calls and says, this is what's happened to me. So we were able to bring in that mom and just love on her, and just kind of continue with this relationship that we already had with her, and just resourcing her a lot of grief resources, and talking with her, and making sure that she had counseling available to her if that's something she wanted to pursue. And really, we just met with her week to week, or every couple weeks, however she was comfortable. And we did that for several months with her. Sometimes you don't get as long of a lasting relationship with a client if they've had an early pregnancy, loss, and miscarriage. We find that sometimes they, 2 or 3 sessions into meeting with a mentor within your center, if that's a resource that you have, or if you've connected them with a parent care coordinator, sometimes a few sessions is just enough for them to really process and begin on their grief journey in the best way possible, and in a healthy way. You're kind of making sure there's a lot of postpartum risk of depression and significant clinical depression with a loss. So just making sure she's resourced and aware that that's something that providers are, whoever her providers are, that she's following up with them, that kind of thing. But we were able to walk with that mom, and joyfully until she became pregnant again. And her and her husband delivered a healthy baby, full-term baby after that. So, and she actually still is a client, still comes in. So we get to see her little sweet rainbow baby, as they call them. And so that would be a client within our center. But I would love to tell you about other clients that we've been connected to through the option line and as a parent care coordinator, and what that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. And how beautiful that God blessed that family with a rainbow. And how beautiful also that your center has walked with them through every step of the way. I think a lot of times there's a perception that, pregnancy centers are just there for diapers and baby wipes and, things like that, or maybe a one-time visit for a pregnancy test, but you really are in it for the long haul with your clients. And I just think that's such a beautiful thing. So tell us about a family that you've served through your parent care coordinator role.
Yeah. Having sort of expanded what was already within our center. So just growing this parent care coordinator role and understanding that there would be families, and many of them are finding prenataldiagnosis.org, or perhaps they're Be Not Afraid, or however we might receive referrals. But if that's something that centers don't feel equipped to handle, or they don't have someone trained in that way within their center, they can go through the option line, prenataldiagnosis.org, and be connected with one. And we kind of find that it's not as important to be local to them. So many of the clients that I've served are not local to me at all. They're from, well, I'm in the Midwest, and they're from Florida, California, Oregon. I mean, they're kind of all over the state because of the limitation of, we don't have that many trained parent care coordinators, but just being able to have that one-on-one support with them. So and it truly is a service of, these families are some of the most abortion vulnerable families that we serve. There's nothing, I feel like nothing more abortion vulnerable almost than when your physician refers you for an abortion. And some of that is wrapped up in, health of the mother, or more so in the diagnosis that your child's been given. And sometimes I find it's initially, I may have a parent that is wants to carry to term. She's made a decision to do that, and this family is going through that together. But all along the way, they're having to make that decision repeatedly, like with each new piece of news that they receive, or each new diagnostic test that's done, is a decision that they're making over and over again, because they have been offered, and they and I know this is state dependent now, but they've been offered a termination for medical reasons, which, is a choice to abort their child at this. And I've had clients who've been given the attitude of, cut your losses. You know that you have been able to get pregnant, you can go on to have another pregnancy. Just really traumatizing news and conversations that they've had with some providers along the way, even, well-meaning friends and family that don't want to see a family suffer in this way. They see it as suffering. Sometimes it's, speaking of suffering, sometimes it's wrapped into the idea that the baby would be suffering. You don't want the baby to suffer, and like, this is a most loving choice, and that we don't see evidence of baby suffering in utero. It's the safest place. It's the it's where they're meant to be, until something says otherwise, until, there might be a need to deliver earlier, that kind of thing. But anyway, some of the families that I've received, I remember one mom, and she, and many of these women have had a prior loss. So that is, there's always a lot to unpack with the families that we serve. Sometimes they've had prior loss, so they're coming into this pregnancy, and then they receive this news of a diagnosis or a potential diagnosis. A screening's been done.
Shelley, I'm sorry. Let me pause for a second because you mentioned an important distinction. There are screening tests and then there are diagnostic tests. Do you want to share a little bit about what the difference is and why that matters?
Sure, for sure. Many women are offered screening, or it's just almost wrapped into, this is the normal standard of care for, early in your pregnancy, 8 to 10 weeks. Usually you're having blood draws, you're having screening, some markers, the triple markers, the quad markers, things that are just screening tests that they only will reveal a potential risk of you having a child with such and such diagnosis. So they're screening for different genetic risk and markers, that kind of thing. But they are not diagnostic. They are not certain. And from there, a woman would be offered more diagnostic tests that come with more certainty. Even diagnostic tests can have errors and mistakes and things that can happen with that. So, I know a lot of women may have this knee-jerk response. I have had this screening test. It shows that I have a risk for this or that. And they may be leaning towards or considering their option of terminating that pregnancy, of having an abortion. And there's no certainty with that. Your baby may be 100% healthy, and to make a decision to terminate at that point in the pregnancy would just, what a loss to make that decision without all the information. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, screenings is something that, and most people, they go into it with the idea that, oh, we're going to find out what we're having. So, it's a gender reveal and information, but it's the same thing. I get this feeling when we have women come in that are coming for an ultrasound, and, they're maybe farther along in their pregnancy or something like that. At that very moment, we may find out something about that baby that is not what that family was expecting. We see something we didn't expect to see on ultrasound, or we see a fetal demise. Maybe you're doing a scan on there is no heartbeat, and you're having to share that news. Anyway, there's some more diagnostic things that give more certainty, but so much of, I think, early pregnancy decisions, when they're given an option or considering an option to terminate, are based on just screenings. They're just completely uncertain.
Yeah. And so then they've basically, they've gone in, you said, to see what they're having, and then they've had the wind knocked out of them through the trauma of a, potential diagnosis, or what they're thinking is a diagnosis, but they might not even have all the facts yet to make that decision. So then they come to you, Shelley. So I interrupted you when you were about to share about a family you've served. So I'll let you get back to that story.
And I was just sharing that initially she just shared with us, there's no good news. And she was beyond, she probably had the typical, and I know she did have the typical screening, and actually her screenings were negative. There was nothing that came up in the screening, but in some of the initial ultrasounds, they were starting to see some things, and many things with body systems, cardiac and brain, and all of these were coming out in the initial anatomy scans that they were doing. And some of the early ultrasounds were having findings. So it's kind of like each step of the way, they're just like receiving bad news and concerning news, and just it's so trauma inducing, all the news that they're receiving along the way. And we often say that the biggest trauma is often in the diagnosis. Like you said, the wind knocked out of them. There's grief in that, the loss of the pregnancy that they thought they'd have, the loss of the child that they thought they had. Maybe they have been given a diagnosis of a congenital abnormality that you can kind of know the course of what that looks like in these children. And so there's grief in that loss, and the diagnosis itself can be very traumatic. We often say even more so traumatic than carrying to term, giving birth, and even if there's a loss of that child, if they've been given this resource that we can offer them, the parent-centered, trauma-informed case management support. That's what we say we give them throughout the rest of their pregnancy. And just being able to connect with them in that way, help them prepare for what's ahead, help them build memories around their pregnancy. Baby is still alive and growing and in their uterus, and can their families make memories around this? And just preparing for their birth, and many times preparing for the life of this child. That not all babies given a prenatal diagnosis, even ones that sound severe, are going to die. Some of them are going to live with that illness, congenital anomaly, whatever it might be. Some of them live with that. So we need to help them prepare to, what if this child shows himself to be robust and stronger and not as frail as the picture that maybe initially was painted. So I just think about the client that she said no good news, and really almost all along her pregnancy it was now they're finding this, now they're finding this, and now this is that, until we got towards the end of the pregnancy and they kind of do some follow-up work with fetal sonography and those kind of things, and get a better picture of their brain and their heart. And one of our families, just all towards the end, it started, well, now we don't see quite the brain issue that we were seeing, or now the hole in her heart has changed and now we're seeing this. And it was like things were coming around at the end, and it was like, this was a baby that your physician had referred you for an abortion at 18 weeks, and in a state that doesn't offer abortion, and had mentioned, you could travel to another state. And here this baby is starting to give us a picture that she's going to live, and she may do far better than they expected. And now that little baby is 4 months old, and she is gorgeous and beautiful and doing unbelievably well. And that's just the biggest blessing, to get to walk with these families through those stories.
That is so incredible. Thank you for sharing that, Shelley, and thank you for being with us today. I'm sure for a lot of these families that are served by our parent care coordinators, it does seem like there's no good news. But in fact, when they connect with you, they actually have a little bit of great news, and that's that they don't have to walk the journey alone. Thank you, Shelley, for all that you do, and thank you for being willing to come on and share with our listeners about your work as a parent care coordinator. Prenataldiagnosis.org and our Option Line team are available 24/7 for families facing a prenatal diagnosis. We can get them connected with a parent care coordinator who can provide the same level of care to them right where they are. It's really beneficial for our pregnancy help centers and other pregnancy help organizations to be ready to use this service as well. So if this podcast has struck a nerve, maybe consider pursuing some training to become a little more involved. But at the very least, please know that prenataldiagnosis.org is available as a resource, and you can use it anytime.
All right. Well, Shelley and Nafisa, thanks so much for being here. It's always good to highlight prenataldiagnosis.org and And now specifically the work of the parent care coordinator. It's such an essential service that we can offer to clients through pregnancy centers, referring them to that website and that resource. And also for any individuals who are listening, if you know of somebody who is facing a prenatal diagnosis and is just looking for that support, it's so good to know that this is out there. So I'll add some links to the notes, some additional information for those who are seeking more. And we hope to have more coming soon on this topic. So with that, subscribe to the Pregnancy Help Podcast so that you don't miss an episode. And thanks for listening to this episode of the Pregnancy Help Podcast.